I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
You know, way back in the old days, when mama and daddy were working, way before cell phones, we were told you don't call them at work unless it was an emergency. And I remember when I started working, and daddy would say, if he ever had to call me, oh, I'm so sorry to call you at your job. And so we started always thinking that you didn't just call just to chat when you were at work, and your kids didn't call you either. And I reflected on this recently because my adult daughter now has a job. And I've hesitated to call her at work because she's busy. And I don't want to call her to ask her, well, I'm getting ready to go to the store. Do you need anything? And when I text her and she doesn't see the text because she's not on her phone, I just don't call. And so now I'm starting to think we have gotten so ubiquitous with phone communication by phone or by text. I'm starting to wonder, should you allow your kids to call you at your job? Now, I say that knowing that sometimes parents have to make sure that their kids get home safely. If they're working, they need that daily check in. Sometimes they'll call them. Almost everybody's got a cell phone now. But we also have some jobs where it can be detrimental if your kid is calling you at work. So, how do we balance that? Do you allow your children to call you quickly to check in? Do you have them text you? Or do you tell them, like our parents told us, you don't call unless it's an emergency? What do you guys think? It's a different day.
Yeah, and like you say, everybody has a cell phone. And so people are on their phones more often than they were when there was a phone tied to a cord in a wall. So calling is such an easy thing to do, or texting. But there are a lot of jobs where they really will fire you if you're on your phone all the time, because that means you're not working. And depending on what you're doing, I mean, let's say you're at a restaurant and you're the person on the grill, but you can't be on your phone and you're yelling.
Burn up my food.
Right. So I think it sometimes it depends on what the job is. You know, if you have a job where you're on the phone anyway, you might sort of get away with it because it's not really noticeable because you're talking anyway. So, you know, people don't really know if you're talking to a client or you're talking to your child unless you start fussing or something. But
yes.
But
some people say we do.
Yes. But I'm the same way. I will not call Zakia on her job because she's working. And I don't want to seem like I'm not respecting the fact that she's working. It's like, oh, well, you know, you're my daughter. I can just call you anytime.
Right.
You know, so I'm trying to think. Well, when she was growing up, which was interesting because you know, some years I worked at the school where she attended, so we saw each other all the time. But she didn't take advantage of it, like running down to the office all the time and then mama this, mama that. I mean, she didn't do that. You know, she acted like a student, you know, and treated me like a, you know, person that worked at the school when we were at school. So I think that you do have to have some boundaries so that your children respect the workplace and they understand that you have to observe certain protocol, you know, and focus on what you're doing. But I do think you need to have it so that they can call you in an emergency, but you have to also define what an emergency is.
Yes.
That is so funny that you say that because, well, first of all, I will say that Lavinia, who is working as a teacher with her husband in China, I can't just call her at any time because we are on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of time. And usually she will call me if she just wants to chat, or we will set up a time where we can get together and talk on the phone. But as you were saying this, I was remembering this comedy channel that I watch every now and then. and they have different ethnic groups that will talk about the jokes and the funny stuff that goes on in their own families, that are basically reflective of their cultural background. So I was watching this Asian guy once, and he was talking about his folks, and he was studying away at school, and he called up his father, and his father was, "What you calling here for? You sick? You need money?" And the son said, "No." "Well, if it's not important, don't call here no more." He slammed the phone down, and I was laughing so badly that I was crying, because you had to see this guy act this out and then talk about, and then it was the same thing with every cultural group. They would talk about how their parents would react to them calling home just to check in, and they're like, "This isn't important. Don't be calling me. If you ain't dead, don't be calling me." So it was this kind of thing. Uh, and I noticed that even with my own students, even though, and I am currently teaching kids who are in elementary school, so this isn't high school, and these kids, they have their phones. They're usually kept in their backpacks, because typically students are not supposed to be on phones. But when you hear these stories of these school shootings, these kids are texting their parents. So obviously they have their phones with them at a time when they can reach them for this kind of emergency. And you hate to think that you have to have that kind of emergency, but this is the world that we live in. But I think a child should be able to call home or call their folks and define what an emergency is. Because I remember not being in the habit of calling mama unless it was that time of my monthly cycle and I was having really bad cramps, and the teacher would send me to the office so that I could call and have mama come and get me. And those are the only times that I remember ever really needing to call home.
And I don't think we ever called at work for something. We didn't call them at work for work, because that meant there was an emergency. And I remember when mama went back to work after Doreen Naima was in school full time, because she took a few years off until Naima, got into first grade, and then she went back to work. And I remember her sitting us down and saying, "Now don't call here and say that, Cheryl's still sucking her thumb, or Doreen won't do this or whatever." She said, "Don't call here just to tattle. You only call if there is an emergency." So that got stuck in our heads right away. If something, because and that was what was funny, because we didn't think about the fact that we were like everybody else, were probably latchkey kids, because we were coming home and there was an adult, and it wasn't an adult home because daddy had already gone to work after he had given us lunch. And when we come back, we had 2-3 hours before mama came home. But now I think it's the world that we live in. It's probably, I don't know if it's more dangerous. Maybe it is. Obviously, for school shootings, it is. But I think we are more paranoid about things happening to our children, so that children are told, sometimes they're encouraged to, check in when you get home. Let me know where you are. Maybe you have your location on your phone or whatever, so that they always are in touch. But that's the thing, is that I don't know, does it make them safer, or does it just make us feel better knowing where your child is? But like we say, there are some jobs where if you're on the phone and your kid is calling every day 2 or 3 times, and when I worked in newspapers, that's what happened. We would get kids, and some of the kids, they would always call. You always knew when this guy's son would call and talk, and it was fine for us because we were pretty casual. But a lot of times people would call and you didn't have time to talk, and if it was just calling to check in, okay, you're fine, okay, goodbye. So, you know, but that's the thing, is that I don't know if we should, if we can, if we should call our kids. I mean, like I say, I won't call Sarah at her job. She'll say, "Well, just go on and call me." I says, "No, you're working." And are we too much of a slave to the workplace culture? I don't know.
So I think like you say, when you have the latchkey child situation, we did have those few hours before our mother came home, and there is a lot more concern where you feel like you need to check in, you need to make sure that your child is okay, and some parents, that's their daily routine. Okay, call me when you get home. So if the child doesn't call, then an hour, if they're an hour late, you're panicking because you're at work and they didn't call. And you know I've seen that, and I understand, because as you said, things are dangerous. You do have some outrageous things happening that weren't happening when we were growing up. We did not.
Or we didn't know about them.
Oh, right. Yeah, that could be. I think maybe there's more knowledge about it because more information is being shared. I mean, people could have just been just as nutty as they were, as they are now. They could have been then. We just didn't hear about it. But because
people were nutty back then, but they didn't have access to crazy behavior.
And you didn't have a cell phone to tell everybody instantly when it happened.
Yeah.
But I think if you do have your child calling all the time, then they don't get the sense of, well, the workplace is someplace where you're working and you don't have time to be just chit-chatting. And you might have a place where the people who run the place don't mind, or they understand, or it might get kind of annoying. It's like, look, you're working. Get a babysitter. I mean, you never know. Some people might be sensitive about it. Some people might not be. But I think there does need to, you do have to instill a respect for the workplace in your child. But also, we have to look at the fact that we got this latchkey child situation. And why is that? And I think, unfortunately, we're depending too much on electronics or whatever instead of human contact. Because I do remember there were some times, maybe in an emergency or whatever, when I would be, taken next door if it was going to be some kind of emergency. I don't always know what the emergency was. But at least I had, the neighbors, the Peels next door, if I had to stay with them a few hours for some reason. I think
that's a whole nother thing too. That's a different conversation, is because we also don't know our neighbors the way we did.
Yeah.
Now,
and that's what's missing.
And that's what's missing, because if you don't know your neighbors so that your child doesn't have an emergency contact next door, across the street, 2 doors down, and because our neighborhoods are ever changing, and that's just the transient way that we live now, that also gives us a little bit more angst about, okay, did they get home okay? And we don't know if that next door neighbor is safe because we don't know that person. They just moved in, or maybe, or maybe they don't speak the same language, because, our neighborhoods are, some of our neighborhoods are very diverse. Mine is, there's people who speak Spanish on one side and people who speak Chinese on the other side. So, but we've tried to make connections with all of them. So at least I can say, what's your name, and we can watch each other's houses and those kind of things. But a lot of times, and especially in urban areas, people don't know their neighbors. So they don't know who to trust. You don't know who a safe person is if your kid gets locked out. Or something happens, so those are the things that, should you let your child call you at work? Yeah, you should, but with rules. Maybe you just have them text you when they get home and say, maybe you keep your location on their phone, or their location on your phone.
Yeah, you can do that
at home. And like I said, most kids have phones.
So and parents need to be really more proactive in this age in terms of knowing who your neighbors are, because when your child is small and growing up, they have other kids that are their friends of the same age. I remember Lorelai telling me when she took Royal to school and they were, meeting all the parents and having their teacher meeting set up, there was this one parent who was very connected in getting everyone's number and name and setting up play dates and all this stuff to make those connections. Because she said, these kids are going to be together at this school probably for the next 8 years when they graduate from 8th grade. And I want to be able to build friendships with the parents of my own son's kids, of my own son's friends. So she was very proactive in doing that. Lorelai was very impressed with that and felt like, here was a parent who was willing to build relationships with other parents so that there would be some kind of connection, not just for emergencies, but for friendship purposes, for,
Yes.
those things are important in a world where there is so much technology that the complaint amongst educators is that children don't know how to be social.
Yes, that
And
is
it's
a big
so
deal.
funny because, 3 of my closest friends are mommy friends that we became friends when our kids were like 3 and 4 years old because they danced at the same place. Now,
Mhm.
those kids are grown and gone and we still get together and this is part of my friend group because we made those connections. And when Sarah was little and she went to the same school and you were in the play yard, so you got to know those other parents. But that's the thing is that we have stopped communicating as adults. We've stopped learning how to be friends. And there was a lot of social things that we missed during, this past 2 years now of the pandemic because kids were on Zoom, so they didn't have that same connection with the friends or the friends' parents. Because when Sarah was little, there were kids who knew who I was, and I wouldn't have known. But all the kids know whose parents the kids belong to.
That's true. And you really need to
From
have a
preschool
community.
on.
Yeah,
From
I mean,
preschool on. They
yeah,
know.
yeah, they know. I mean, and I'm grateful that Zakia went to the kind of school where there was a lot of parent interaction and involvement, and all the children knew all the parents of,
Yeah.
who was whose
Yeah.
mother and father. And so we had a community where if something happened or if this person couldn't get to school to pick up their child, or they can call this person and say, okay, well, so and so is going to pick up my child. They can call the office,
Right.
let them know that another parent is going to take their child home, and you had to meet your child and pick them up after school. So I think it, and that was good that the school had that kind of a safety measure where we made sure parents picked up their children from school.
Yeah.
And you do have to have parents that make those connections. Usually by the time you start having children, you start making friends based on your children's friends, which is a safety thing because you need to know who your children's friends are. You need to know the parents so you can know who's safe. Because the safe person that you trust might not be your next door neighbor. It might be the person 2 blocks away, but they go to the same school.
Yeah.
So you need to have people. And I think that's what's missing. You don't have people. And you're right. We have to take the initiative to make the connections, get to know the parents at the school that our children are attending, have some instructions on who to go to, who to call if you can't reach me at work for whatever reason. Because some people, the way they work, they might work outdoors where they're not accessible to a phone, or might be on a machine or any kind of thing, so they can't talk. So you have to have a backup person. And I think it is important for us to rely on people that we trust, which means you have to find the people that you can trust, because anything can happen with a phone, a cell phone, batteries go dead. If you're depending on your child to call you every day to make sure they're home, something happens to the phone, gets lost, you're going to be panicking all day and then thinking, well, should I leave? Should I go home? Because your child didn't call you.
And you know what? People don't all remember this because it was now 20 years now. But when 9/11 happened, the cell
Mm,
phone towers all went down. They took all the
Mm.
cell towers down to keep someone from being able to ignite a bomb through the cell phones.
Wow.
So,
Hmm.
yes, a lot of people don't know that because
I didn't.
people sometimes people a lot of people had cell phones back then, but a lot of people still had landlines. When I
Mm.
needed to call Sean, I couldn't call him on his cell phone. I called the Globe, who could, because he was in DC, I could call the
Ooh.
Globe and they patched me through there. Now he had
Mhm.
called me earlier before the second, well, right after the second plane went to the tower.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
there was another one that went to the Pentagon.
Right.
Right.
So, and he was 4 miles from there. So
That's scary.
I think that, whether anybody still has a landline, I do, or not, sometimes the phone, like you said, it can go dead. The towers could go down, or you could run out of batteries, or they could lose the phone, or it could be
Yeah.
stolen, or anything
Yeah.
could happen. So we need other avenues. We need other people, and I think it's hard because not everyone is social. Not everyone's going to come up to the schoolyard and want to make friends with the parents. Some parents are rushing off to work. Some parents, they're drop and go. Some parents are like, you know what, I didn't come here to make friends, my kid is just here, whatever. But we have to be
Proactive.
proactive, and we have to be
Yeah.
the ones who are teaching our kids how to be social
Yes.
and how to be
Yes.
safe,
Yes.
because we're forgetting how to be social because we're always looking at our phone.
Mm.
Yeah.
Look at people around you when you're on the T, or, well, that would be the L.
Well.
In
Well,
Chicago.
when
Yeah.
you're on public transportation, let me say that.
Yes.
Yes.
When you're on public transportation, or when you're waiting in line for something, or even when you're at a restaurant, we're all on our phones the whole time. So we don't.
Unless you're in France, they're reading a book. I was
Oh,
shocked to see that.
that's good.
I said people still read books on the train.
Wow.
Yes.
How refreshing.
Yes.
Yes.
But the thing is that we're not engaging, and you don't necessarily
Yeah.
want to engage with people when you're on the train anyway, because
Yeah. Yeah, I think I took a picture of Zakia when we were on the train in Korea, and everybody was on their phone. It's like a row of people. Everybody was in their
everybody's
cell
looking
phone, on
down.
their
That's here too. Everybody's looking down.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to be social outside of those things, so that if your kid can't call you at work and they can't text you and they can't let you know and you can't get their location or whatever, that if something were to happen, they have someone else that they can call, or someone
Yeah.
who, someone who can check in with them. If you're late picking them up because there's a big traffic accident or something, someone that you can call.
Right.
We have got to stop being this whole culture of the nuclear family. It's just us, and we're the only people we can rely on, because
Right.
sometimes we need each other.
You
So
gotta have an extension.
sometimes your kid can't call you at work, or they call you and you don't get the message.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
could happen. It could happen. But I think it's definitely necessary to have some alternatives if you can't be reachable by phone.
Right.
Definitely. Well, once again, we've got to go, and we do want to remind you all to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Three Black Moms. I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. We are three Black moms. Merry Christmas. Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.